Under the soft light of the fading day, the sage continued his walk beneath the canopy of trees, their shadows stretching long and quiet. The breeze stirred gently through the grass, as if listening to his footsteps. Suddenly, from a distance, a man appeared, dressed in fine clothing, yet his face was dark with sorrow. Though his posture still held a trace of dignity, his eyes betrayed exhaustion, bitterness, and despair. Upon recognizing the sage, the man dropped to his knees, hands clasped, his voice rough and strained. "Master, I was once a man who had it all: wealth, fame, and friends I believed to be true. But in a single moment of carelessness, they turned on me, used my trust against me, and took everything I spent my life building. Now I have nothing left but empty hands and a shattered heart. I can't trust anyone anymore. Life is nothing but betrayal and suffering. I beg you, please tell me, how many more lifetimes, how much more pain must I endure before I can escape this cruel cycle of rebirth?" The sage gazed at the man for a long while. His eyes held neither pity nor coldness. Then, without a word, he turned toward the roadside, where an old apple tree stood tall under the twilight sky. Its bare limbs still held dozens of ripe, red apples, swaying gently in the wind. "Do you see that apple tree?" the sage asked, pointing. "You will be reborn that many more times equal to the number of apples hanging on its branches, before you can reach true liberation." The man looked up, counting quickly with his eyes, then stared in shock. "That many?" he gasped. "But master, I am not an evil man. Even in my days of fortune, I did good, harmed no one. Why must I be sentenced to so many more lives?" The sage let out a soft sigh, his gaze calm and unwavering. "This is the path you must walk. No one else can walk it for you." The man fell silent, turning his face away, lips pressed tightly together. He spoke no words of thanks, nor did he beg again. His figure stiffened, as if a door within had quietly closed, heavy and unresolved. The sage offered no judgment, no further teaching. He simply continued on his path, leaving behind a soul still caught in its struggle with the world and with itself. As the evening light faded behind the distant mountains, the sage quietly continued his journey. A gentle breeze stirred his silver hair, fine as strands of heaven, carrying with it the lingering sorrow of the man he had just left behind. The narrow dirt path wound through a vast field, where wildflowers bloomed thick on both sides, vivid, delicate, and fleeting, just like life itself. Up ahead, beside a moss-covered stone, a middle-aged woman sat slumped over, her face buried in her hands. Her muffled sobs echoed across the empty field. When she sensed someone approaching, she looked up, and her tear-swollen eyes filled once more at the sight of the sage. She dropped to her knees, her voice trembling with desperation. "Please, master, have mercy on me. I've lost everything: my husband, my parents, my siblings, they all left, one after another. I'm the only one left behind, like someone abandoned in a cold and empty world. I lived a good life, walked the righteous path, cared for my loved ones with all my heart. So why has all the pain fallen on me? I have no more tears to cry, no one left to love. Please tell me, how many more lives must I endure before I'm freed from this ocean of suffering? The sage did not answer right away. He gently brushed aside a sprig of wildflower growing by the roadside, then turned his gaze toward the vast field ahead, where thousands of blossoms swayed in the wind, purple, white, golden, stretching as far as the eye could see, like a living tapestry woven by earth and sky. "Do you see those flowers?" the sage said softly. "Each one is a lifetime. Before you reach liberation, you must be reborn as many times as there are flowers blooming in this field." The woman's tearful eyes widened as she looked out over the sea of tiny, fragile blooms dancing in the breeze. Hundreds. Thousands. Beyond counting. Her throat tightened, and a sob broke free. But Master, I lived a good life. I never hurt anyone. I did no evil. Isn't that enough? Why would God or the universe be so cruel? The sage looked at her, his eyes kind yet unwavering. No one is being cruel to you. It's just that you're still measuring pain by your own expectations. You hope that one good life is enough to earn eternal peace. But the path to liberation isn't counted by what you've lost. It's measured by how you accept and transform that suffering. The woman fell silent. She didn't argue, nor did she continue to lament. Her sobs gradually faded, leaving behind a quiet, aching stillness. She remained seated in the middle of the flower field, her gaze no longer filled with despair, but with something deeper, quieter, as if a truth was beginning to take root. The sage walked on without another word, letting the wind and the flowers continue where he left off, gently comforting a soul just beginning to learn how to walk through sorrow with a heart made wider. The last light of day had thinned into slanted streaks across the earth. After leaving the flower fields behind, the sage continued his journey, following a small incline that led into a sparse forest. Fallen leaves crunched softly beneath his feet, and the air carried the earthy scent of damp soil and dry grass, an aroma of quiet twilight. Under a lone tamarind tree, standing bare in a clearing, a young man was curled up beside a pile of hay. His clothes were torn, his feet calloused, his body gaunt from labor and cold hunger. Though exhausted, the moment he saw the sage, he struggled to his feet, then fell to his knees, pressing his forehead to the ground. "Master," his voice was faint but full of sincerity, "I have nothing to offer you, only this plea, from the depths of my heart. I was born into hardship, raised in poverty and pain. By day, I work for others, scolded and beaten. By night, I sleep on dry grass, hungry, shivering, weary in body and soul. I don't know what happiness feels like. I don't even know why I exist in this harsh world. Please, I beg you tell me, how many more lives must I endure like this before I can finally be free?" The sage didn't answer right away. He looked up toward the wide canopy of the tamarind tree above them. Every branch held countless smaller twigs, and on each twig clustered dozens of tiny green leaves, fresh and unweathered, as if they had never known withering. "Look up at this tree," the sage said gently. "The number of lives you must pass through is as many as the leaves that shimmer on those branches." The young man lifted his eyes. The leaves trembled softly in the breeze, fluttering like the faint glimmer of hope. He didn't try to count, he knew he couldn't. But instead of despair, his eyes began to shine, and tears streamed down his sunken cheeks. "Thank you, Master. Thank you for giving me a number. You made no promise of few, nor of soon. But at least now I know I'll get there. I no longer have to walk in darkness, not knowing." The sage nodded. What he saw in the young man's gaze was not resignation, it was faith. A quiet strength born only from the deepest suffering. The young man bowed 3 times, then stood and walked forward, following the narrow dirt path that still stretched far ahead. Neither of them spoke again, but perhaps, for the first time, the young man moved with a heart unburdened. The sage smiled, then turned and walked away, leaving behind a soul that had begun to free itself, not through miracles, but through the quiet transformation of its own spirit. Darkness began to stretch across the forest as the sage left the old tamarind tree behind. The sky had turned a shade of twilight violet, yet he showed no haste. A cool breeze passed through the trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and fresh sap, whispering to him of the souls he had encountered along the way, each with their own sorrow, their own hope, and their own way of receiving truth. The sage walked slowly to the crest of a small hill, from where the valley below unfolded, slowly sinking into the embrace of night. He stopped and turned, his gaze drifting toward the memory of 3 people who had knelt before him that very day, a wealthy man now bitter with resentment, a grieving woman unable to let go, and a poor young man who gave thanks even for the hardest truth. The breeze stirred his silver hair. The sage closed his eyes for a moment, as if listening to the echoes of the human spirit, the quiet sighs, the falling tears, and the silent smiles of those who had learned to accept. He spoke softly, not to anyone in particular, but as a message to all. Suffering is an inseparable part of this life. No one walks the full path of a human life without falling, without being wounded. But what makes the difference is how we face that suffering. The sage turned toward the west, where the sun had become a faint strip of light behind the distant mountains. Then he walked on, speaking as he went, his words carried on the wind like a message for all still searching for a way through the darkness. Some, like the man beneath the apple tree, count every fruit to curse their fate. Some, like the woman in the flower field, count every loss to weep over it. But then there are those, like the boy beneath the tamarind tree, who, though they see uncountable leaves, still give thanks for being told the truth. Liberation does not come from the number of lives we finish, but from how we come to understand and embrace the nature of suffering in each of them. He paused beneath a great tree just as night settled in. A slender new moon had risen, pale and soft, like the quiet smile of someone who had found peace. "Remember this," he said one last time before fading into the dark, "do not fear living many lives. Only fear living them without learning. For a single life lived with letting go, with love, with understanding, may be worth more than 1,000 lived in blindness." And so, into the night, the sage's words lingered like a gentle breeze, quiet yet enduring, warm enough to stir the heart still seeking a way out of life's long shadow. As night blanketed the land and a slender crescent moon stretched across the sky like a quiet brushstroke of creation, the sage had vanished into the ancient forest. But his words did not dissolve into the wind, they echoed in the hearts of those he had met, like seeds gently sown into the dry, cracked soil of their souls. The once wealthy man still sat by the roadside, beneath the old apple tree, now shedding its leaves one by one. At first, he sat in silence. Then suddenly, he recalled the sage's calm gaze and the weightless yet powerful words he had spoken. The man sighed a sigh unlike any he had breathed before. It wasn't born of anger or regret, but of a quiet realization that his suffering was never greater than the clinging in his own heart. Those who betrayed him had long since walked away, but he had imprisoned himself in a cell of resentment. In the field of wildflowers, the middle-aged woman remained seated among the countless blossoms swaying in the night wind. She picked a small flower and held it gently in her palm. Each petal, soft and fragile, reminded her what she had lost could never be reclaimed. But perhaps, the love she had once given had never truly vanished. It lived on in her memories, in her tears, and now, in her empathy for all those who had ever hurt like she did. She closed her eyes, and this time, her heart felt not heavy, but quietly open. And the young man, the one who had once slept on dry grass, now walked on through the dark. His back still hunched from exhaustion, but his eyes shone with light. Within his chest, there was no longer only pain, but also a steady faith in something beyond it. He no longer needed to know what tomorrow held, for tonight, he understood. Suffering is not the end of the road. It is part of a greater journey toward awakening. Each of them, 3 people, 3 lives so different, had heard the same guidance. Yet each received it in their own way. And in that difference lies the depth of the story. As the sage had said, suffering is inescapable. But it is how we respond to suffering that determines where the road of life will lead. Some choose to curse it. Some collapse beneath it. But some choose to walk on, with gratitude for being alive, for having felt pain, and for the chance to learn how to understand, to love, and to let go. In the end, this tale is not just the journey of a sage or of 3 lost souls. It is the journey of all of us, those who wander through life, carrying wounds, hopes, and longings. And perhaps, only when we learn to smile amidst the imperfection, to give thanks even for what is unfinished, can we touch liberation not in the next life, but in the very moments we are living now.